Hey there besties. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're continuing our recap of the manhwa, Depths of Malice. If you're new to this series, check the description below for links to previous episodes. Before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to all our supporters. If you're enjoying the content and want to help keep the channel going, consider buying me a coffee. There's a link in the description below. Every little bit helps, and I appreciate all your love and support. Lastly, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy the video. It really helps our channel grow. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. At night, Rita sat with Yersha. "How is your new body suiting you, Yersha?" she asked cheerfully. "Very well, as you can see," Yersha replied. "Did you take care of the corpse?" Rita asked. "I threw it off a cliff. It was completely smashed," Yersha said. "What have you found in the home?" Rita inquired. "Nothing much yet," Yersha said, then added, "except for one thing." He reached into his clothes and retrieved a picture of a familiar plant, placing it on the table for Rita to see. "You found this plant?" Rita exclaimed, recognizing the image. She recalled reading about the plant in the royal library. If ingested regularly, it caused addiction and symptoms similar to lung damage, resembling pneumonia. Additionally, ceasing its use could lead to sudden shock or even death. What a frightening plant, she thought. Prince Van Brandt had informed her that after the previous king's death, all the maids who handled his meals either died suddenly or disappeared. "Poisoning the king, proud Carter, you're worse than I thought," Rita reflected, recalling her thoughts on that day. Yersha explained, "I found one of these plants in Nathan's secret study. I couldn't take a sample for fear of being noticed, but it was identical to the drawing." "Excellent," Rita remarked, clenching her fist in excitement. The single specimen in Jean's bedroom wasn't enough, but if Nathan was cultivating more, we can finally link this to Carter, she thought. If you can find out exactly how Nathan came to receive this plant from Proud, it would be helpful. "Is there anything else?" Rita asked Yersha. "Nothing, my lady. Not even a week has passed since I started occupying this body. Please give me some time," Yersha replied calmly. Nathan made a face as Yersha adjusted his expression. "Lower the corners of your mouth and put more tension in your eyes," Rita instructed, looking a bit concerned. "Like this?" Yersha asked, adjusting his facial expression. "Yes, perfect," Rita confirmed. "And be careful. We've uncovered Proud's secret, so there's a good chance he may come after you," she added seriously. "It's no matter. I am not that Nathan," Yersha said with a smirk. The next day, Rita examined her complexion. "My skin is ruined from the stress of the past few days. I'll have Jana prepare a massage," she thought. "Miss, are you awake?" Jana called gently from outside as she knocked. "Speak of the devil," Rita thought, inviting Jana in. "Miss Verta, an urgent message has arrived from Count Alberhart," Jana said with a smile, holding out a letter. "From my father?" Rita exclaimed, leaning closer to take the letter. What could he possibly have to say after shirking his own daughter's trial? She wondered, reading the letter. "What? They're arriving tomorrow?" she shouted in shock. Preparations were underway to welcome Count Alberhart at the Alberhart Manor. Rita walked gently down the steps to greet her parents. "The preparations are perfect. They wouldn't suspect that their daughter is no longer in this body," she thought as she stood in front of the mansion. Soon, a carriage approached and stopped near her. "They've been holed up in Tatum for so long without so much as a letter. Why now?" she wondered. The carriage door opened, and Count Alberhart stepped out. "Welcome back, father," Rita said with a smile. "It's been too long. Have you been well?" "Yes, and yourself?" he asked politely. "I've been well. And you?" she replied. "I've been well. Your mother, however, has been through a great deal," he said. "Mother?" Rita thought, looking surprised. A lady stepped out of the carriage. It was Countess Alberhart. My darling," she said cheerfully, smiling. "Mother!" Rita exclaimed, hugging her. "Have you been well?" "I missed you dearly," her mother said happily, embracing her. "Verta, my poor child," she added warmly. Truthfully, I prefer her warmth over the cold and distant demeanor of my father, Rita thought inwardly. But what is that smell? She wondered, sniffing her mother. You must have been lonely on your own all this time. I'm truly sorry, darling, her mother said gently. She glanced at her husband, who was speaking with a butler, before focusing back on Rita. There is something I haven't told you. I tried many times to write to you but couldn't find the words. Forgive me for being so heartless, she said. What do you mean, mother? Rita asked, tensing up. Her mother went back to the carriage and returned with a baby. Say hello to Lucian, she said, showing the baby to Rita. Rita's mouth dropped open in shock. What in the world? She thought. Your younger brother, her mother explained, holding the baby gently. This is what the Count meant earlier? Rita thought, gritting her teeth in anger. How could this have happened? Rita shouted in anger in her parlor. The only advantage to this godforsaken body was being an only child with no competition for the heir. Yasha, observing her from his new form, remained calm. Was that really the only reason? Not only is this body that of a count's daughter, but it's also quite beautiful and healthy, he thought, watching her rage. Others return with souvenirs from foreign trips, but instead, they bring back a baby. She screamed. Congratulations, my lady, Yasha said, causing her to turn sharply towards him. Congratulations? Are you joking? That baby isn't my brother. He's a curse. A curse. Rita shouted angrily. She's completely mad, Yasha thought with disgust. There are more pressing matters. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a ledger. I found this hidden in a desk drawer in Nathan's personal study, he said, placing the ledger on the table. What? Isn't this a ledger? Rita asked, picking it up. It was originally written in code. Using Nathan's notes, I managed to decipher part of it, Yasha explained. Rita's eyes lit up as she read through the contents. So Proud Carter is now dealing in illegal exports to Tatum, is he? What is the cargo? She asked. I'm not sure. Even in the original, the names were replaced with symbols, Yasha replied. How clever, Rita said, smirking as she studied a particular section of the ledger. But why would the final place of transaction be Richard instead of Tatum? She inquired. This is my own speculation, Yasha said. It's likely that the final buyer is in the kingdom of Richard. Then why bother traveling through Tatum? It's a much longer route and would be more expensive to ship through there, Rita pressed. Likely to conceal the cargo's origins, Yasha replied. The sea separates Osland and Richard, so they primarily trade by ship. Tatum and Richard share a border, so their trade is overland. Overland inspections are often much more relaxed than sea inspections. Just as I expected from Proud Carter. Even his smuggling is done through that cunning fox, Rita said calmly. To go as far as concealing the cargo's origin. What sort of cargo could it be? Considering how long it takes to transport, it can't be something perishable. She shut the ledger with frustration. I'm dying to know. Yasha, I'm afraid the time has come for you to return to Tatum, she instructed. I'd like to return, my lady, but we have no pretext. Moreover, Carter's minions are still watching me, Yasha said. No pretext? We'll just have to create one, Rita said, her excitement evident. A few days later, Rita met with Prince Van Brandt in the administrative division. She wore a warm smile as she sat across from him. Prince Brandt seemed tense, his mind flickering back to their previous encounter. He lowered his gaze to her chest before quickly looking away, his face flushed. Why do I consistently turn into a bumbling youth in front of this woman? He thought, gripping his trousers tightly. Your Highness, Rita said, startling him as he snapped back to reality. I must ask you to look at this. She placed some documents on the table. I received this document directly from Baron Nathan Hector, who takes orders from Marquis Carter. Prince Brandt leaned over and picked up the documents, his expression changing as he read through them. But this is, he thought, stunned. How shocking. If we continue investigating this matter, we might finally be able to pin something on Marquis Carter, he said, considering their options. It does seem that way, Rita agreed, her excitement evident. However, he is a meticulous man. He wouldn't even tell Nathan what exactly they were smuggling. What are the chances that Nathan is lying? It's suspicious that he would betray the Marquis so suddenly, Prince Brandt said, his suspicion clear. That's understandable, Rita thought, noting his worried expression. After all, he knows nothing of Yersha or the forbidden sorcery. She added aloud, I know Nathan Hector's weakness. Prince Brant looked stunned, his face reddening. His weakness? He asked in shock. I'm afraid I cannot reveal what that weakness is, Rita said. However, we can trust what he says. If you say he can be trusted, I believe you, Prince Brant said, accepting her assurance. I have an idea of what the Marquis may be smuggling. Really? What could he be secretly selling to Richard? Rita asked, intrigued. Do you recall what you once said to me? Prince Brant asked suddenly, prompting her to think back to their previous conversation. Unless they are fools, I doubt they would be distributing opiates domestically. Selling abroad would be safer and more difficult to trace. My family's trading rights were advantageous in that regard, and if anything went wrong, they would have pinned the blame on us, she had said. You suspected that Marquis Carter hoped to use your family's network to distribute drugs. However, I fear that is not the case. Most likely, he's smuggling gunpowder, Prince Brant concluded. Gunpowder? Rita exclaimed, almost stuttering. But gunpowder is a technology unique to our kingdom. Isn't it forbidden to export it without permission? That is correct, Prince Brant confirmed. If caught, not only does one face the death sentence, but the next 2 generations of their family are stripped of their rank. Prince Brant hesitated before continuing. If anyone outside of this room learns of this, it will become a serious diplomatic issue. A diplomatic issue? Rita asked, confused. I forgot to mention, Prince Brant said, his tone grim, Proud Carter has been supplying gunpowder to the rebel forces opposing the Richard royalty. What? Rita exclaimed, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. I always thought Proud Carter was a madman, but it turns out I've been underestimating him, Rita thought, a small smile forming. Forgive me, but may I ask where you received your information, Your Highness? She asked. Prince Brant hesitated for a moment before responding. I hate to admit this, but it came from the Richard royalty. The rebels were suddenly using firepower, so there was no way to ignore it. So you've been aware of this the whole time? Rita asked calmly. All I knew was that someone was illegally smuggling gunpowder. I only realized it was Proud Carter just now while speaking with you. Lady Verta, if you hadn't come forward, it would have taken much longer to identify the criminals, he said. I see. It seems I've performed another public service, Rita thought cheerfully. I'm happy to hear I was of help, she told Prince Brant with a smile. Prince Brant blushed as he watched her. He's as adorable as ever, Rita remarked inwardly. Ah, I'd like to speak with you about Baron Nathan Hector, she said calmly. After all, it's thanks to him we discovered the Marquis' illegal dealings. Considering his cooperation, can he be granted any leniency? Very well, Prince Brant agreed. In this case, I will grant Baron Hector immunity and continue to consider his contributions. Truthfully, he may be at risk in his current position. I fear Marquis Carter may have realized Nathan's betrayal, Rita said. Is that true? He's quicker than I thought, Prince Brant exclaimed in shock. Hence I have an idea, Rita said. An idea? Prince Brant asked, sounding puzzled. Send Baron Hector to Tatum as an on-site investigator under the guise of exile. If you attempt to protect him, Marquis Carter could very well finish him off himself. It's much better to send the Baron to Tatum, where he can further aid our investigation, she suggested. After some deliberation, Prince Brant said, Very well, I shall discuss the details with Baron Hector himself. If you don't mind, may I relay your decisions to the Baron on my way out of the palace? If it's no trouble, of course, Rita replied, sounding pleased. Congratulations. Soon you'll be returning home, Rita told Yersha when she met him at the administrative division. Is that true? He asked, his reaction cold. What a flat response. Are all desert people so stoic? Rita thought, observing his demeanor. Well, considering the past, we can't be sure until the moment of departure. When you have the chance, go to the rear garden. Prince Brant will be waiting for you at the pavilion. You know what he looks like, yes? She asked. Yes. The rose-gold 24-carat blonde who once visited the estate with tulips, Yersha said, nodding. His descriptions matched the prince's appearance. Were his descriptions always so materialistic? I suppose it makes sense for a prince from a nation rich in gold, Rita thought as she glanced at him. Just remember to be careful. I'm off to turn in my letter of resignation, she told him with a smile before walking away. Yersha let out a faint smile as he watched her leave. Rita, feeling content, thought to herself, quitting is always such a delight. She then spotted Heather Maximilian approaching and wore a smirk. Officer Heather. Rita called, drawing her attention. It's good to see you, she greeted warmly. Oh, what a fright, Heather exclaimed, as though shocked by Rita's voice. Have you been well? Rita asked cheerfully. If I provoke her, no doubt she would throw another tantrum with that awful personality of hers, Rita thought, watching Heather quietly. Well, it is my resignation day after all. Time to forget rank and have it. Yes, see to your duties, Miss Verta, Heather said calmly, walking past Rita. Rita appeared surprised by Heather's attitude. Huh? What's the matter with her? Was I too obvious about provoking her? No, that's not it, she thought. As Heather walked away, Rita sighed calmly. That's right, the jewelry shop. Seeing as it's on the verge of ruin, she must be worried sick, Rita thought with a smirk. Come to think of it, I should stop by Zucard's later. Later that day, Rita arrived at the jewelry shop, finding it bustling with activity. She noticed a lot of nobles in the store. Oh my, Louise exclaimed happily upon seeing Rita. I wasn't expecting you, my lady. What brings you here today? I was just passing by, Rita said warmly. Business seems to be thriving. It is. I'm planning to move the shop to an even better location soon. It's all thanks to you, Miss Verta, Louise said, beaming. Oh, it's nothing, Rita said with a smile. She glanced around the shop before asking, and how is the Maximilian shop faring? Louise flinched slightly at the question. See those sacks over there? He said, pointing to some garbage. The garbage? Rita asked. More accurately, the recent state of the Maximilians, Louise said, referring to their business's current troubles. Rita remained calm, observing the situation. It seems after miscalculating their autumn profits, they've now invested in high-end sapphires for winter. However, dark fur is in vogue this season, Louise informed her. Compared to deep sapphires, white diamonds pair much better with darker tones, Rita remarked thoughtfully. Exactly. That's why the Maximilians will be stuck with nothing but their unsold stock and rising debts, Louis exclaimed, his excitement showing as he clenched his fist. Excellent work, Louis, Rita praised him. But just then, her gaze shifted to the window. A man was lingering outside, peeking in. Something about him seemed off. What was that? She wondered. No need to worry, my lady. One of the Maximilian spies, no doubt. They should focus on salvaging their own business instead of playing at espionage, Louise scoffed. No wonder it felt like I was being watched, Rita mused. I have something for you, my lady, Louis said, producing a jewelry chest. A token of my gratitude. He opened the chest to reveal a bracelet. It's not much, but I hope you'll accept it. Rita inspected the gift. It's not my usual style, but it's lovely, she said, accepting it. There's more to it, Miss Verta, Louis added, pressing a small button on the bracelet to reveal a concealed blade. Rita's eyes widened. It was made for self-defense. If you ever find yourself in danger, simply undo the bracelet, and you'll have a dagger in hand, Louis explained. I love it. Thank you, Louis, Rita said with a smile, fastening the bracelet. Later, as Rita's carriage moved through the forest, she reflected on the gift. With the Count lurking, it's a timely present. Louis has a knack for knowing exactly what I need, she thought with satisfaction. Every passing moment had been crucial for her, but she felt exhausted. I cannot wait to simply rest as soon as we reach the estate, she thought, but was interrupted by a sudden jolt as the carriage stopped abruptly. What happened? Rita asked, alarmed. John, the coachman, looked concerned. There's a deep hole in the road, we can't go further until it's filled. Rita frowned. A hole? Out of nowhere? It didn't sit right with her. It's suspicious, John. Don't act just yet. Wait, she instructed, her instincts on high alert. They remained there until evening began to fall. Miss, the sun will be setting soon. If we're to fill the hole and return in time, I'll need to find a shovel, John said, moving toward her window. Where will you go? There aren't many houses nearby, she asked. The shade estate is not far. I'll head to the servant's residence, he replied. Waiting here without purpose could be risky. We don't know who might pass by. Nothing strange has happened yet, she thought. How long will you be gone? She asked. About an hour, there and back. If you're worried about waiting alone, shall we go together? He asked. Walk an hour down a dirt path in heels and a corset? Rita frowned at the thought. No, you go, she said with a sigh. I'll hurry back as soon as possible, miss, John promised and rushed off. Moments later, figures emerged from the bushes, faces masked. They advanced toward her carriage. Quick, the coachman's gone. Grab the noblewoman. One of them commanded, just within John's hearing. He froze and looked back. Someone help me. It's a robbery. Please. Rita cried as the men tried to force the door open. She saw John running toward her. Why is he coming back? Didn't he leave? He's just one man. There's no time, just go. She urged silently, her expression sharp. John caught her gaze, understood, and disappeared into the distance. One of the men yanked open the door with a sinister grin. Rita's face remained tense, but determined. They dragged her out and led her away into the forest. For hours, they marched deeper into the trees. No matter what happens, I have to survive, Rita thought, gritting her teeth. Only then can I have my revenge. Move faster, one man ordered, pulling her leash. Another grabbed her roughly from behind. She shuddered with disgust. Filthy pigs, she seethed silently. You won't break me. Eventually, they reached a remote cabin. A cabin in a place like this? She wondered, puzzled. They shoved her inside and locked the door. Moments later, their leader entered, holding a torch. Well, well, Miss Alberhart, he sneered, his grin widening. Who is he? I've never seen this man before. Does he know the real Verta? She thought, her mind racing as she watched the malice in his eyes. Hello. This is our first meeting, but you know my wife, he said, walking toward her with a sinister smile. Baron Ralph Maximilian? He's Heather's husband? Rita's tension grew as she recognized him. His wife works for the royal palace, yet he dares to kidnap a nobleman's daughter? He's mad, she thought. Ralph's gaze hardened. You've heard the news, yes? Our jewelry store was seized by creditors, he said, bringing the torch closer to her face. Rita began to sweat. I was curious, he continued. Suddenly, my store's profits plummeted. But Zucard's? Thriving. How were they getting the money to buy jewels they couldn't afford before? He asked. He placed the torch aside and rubbed his face with one hand, his eyes never leaving hers. Isn't it strange? He mused darkly before grabbing her chin, pulling her close. So, I hired men to follow those scoundrels. And guess what I found? That Lewis fellow sends letters regularly to the Alberhart family. The stench of alcohol filled the air. Just how drunk is he? Rita thought, disgusted. I had my suspicions, Ralph continued, his smile widening. Maybe you were the type who liked to place long-distance orders. So I decided to watch you. Then today I got my proof. He teased, his finger pointed directly at her. He's not just drunk. He's high, Rita thought, her expression hardening as she realized how erratically he was acting. Now what shall I do with you, mistress of my misfortune? Ralph sneered, stroking her face. Rita flinched as he grinned maliciously. I've sent a ransom note to your family. I'll squeeze every bit of wealth I can from them. And after that, what will I do with you? Rita's thoughts raced. If he can't get the ransom, he'll kill me. Where is John? He should have reached the shade estate by now. Ralph slid his hand to hers, and with sudden force, threw her to the floor, pinning her down. Until I get that money from your parents, it'd be a shame to let the time go to waste, he said, removing his shirt. Ralph Maximilian grabbed Rita's chest, his touch vile and invasive. I thought I had finally adjusted to this new life, Rita thought, swallowing her fear. Sheesh, the girls these days sure are developed. My wife's flat as a board, Ralph sneered. Is Heather an accomplice in all this? I suppose I was a nuisance to her, Rita thought bitterly as Ralph ripped her dress, revealing her underdress. He began to undo it, but the moment was interrupted by a loud voice from outside. "Boss, we've discovered a trespasser," one of his men called. Could it be John? Rita's heart raced. "Who is it? Have we been caught already?" Ralph barked. "No, sir. It's a woman. She was skulking around alone. We caught her and brought her here," the man replied. "A woman, it couldn't be," Rita thought, her face tense with disbelief. "Bring her in. We'll question her," Ralph ordered. The door swung open, and the men shoved Julie Shade into the room. She stumbled, crashing to the floor. "Bastards! How dare you treat me so savagely?" she shouted. Rita, still restrained, struggled to get a glimpse. "Oh goddess, why must you test me like this?" she thought, her terror rising. A few hours earlier, Julie had been enjoying a peaceful ride on horseback through the Shade estate. "I didn't realize we rode so far out. It feels so good to be riding again, right, Pegasus?" she said cheerfully, halting her horse. Suddenly, John came bursting through the bushes, tears in his eyes. "My lady, Lady Julia," he shouted, startling her. "You scared me. I thought you were a ghost," Julia exclaimed, her heart racing. "Wait a minute. Aren't you Verta's coachman?" John, panting and bowing politely, said, "Please help us, my lady. My mistress has been kidnapped." "Kidnapped?" Julia's face turned serious. "Where? How did this happen?" "There was a hole at the entrance to the road down yonder. Our carriage got stuck. As soon as I left to get help, some thugs appeared and took Miss Verta," John explained. "I see. I'll save her," Julie declared, spurring Pegasus forward as she galloped into the forest. Night had fallen by the time Julie slowed her horse, scanning the trees for any sign of the kidnappers. "It's been a while since I've ridden this far," she thought, her muscles aching. That's when she spotted it, a cabin in the woods. Could that be where Verta is? She wondered, guiding Pegasus towards it. Unbeknownst to Julie, she had wandered straight into a trap. The kidnappers, hidden among the trees, emerged, pointing spears at her. Pegasus reared, and Julie was thrown to the ground. "Good thing I learned how to fall properly," Julie thought as she hit the dirt. The men quickly surrounded her, tying her hands before she could react. "Untie me this instant. Do you have any idea who I am?" she demanded, her pride bruised as she lay helpless on the ground. Then her eyes landed on Rita. So you were here after all," Julie said in shock, realizing just how dire the situation had become. "Please, don't act like you know me," Rita thought, biting back her frustration. "I was so worried. What happened to your clothes? Did that bastard do this to you?" Julie yelled, drawing Ralph Maximilian's attention. "You fool, how dare you violate my friend?" she shouted, causing Rita to grit her teeth in helplessness. "For the love of everything, please shut up," Rita thought. "Oh, you two ladies must be dear friends," Ralph remarked with a twisted smile, standing up from Rita. He turned his gaze to Julie. "Let's see. With that hair color." "Ah, damn it," Julie muttered, tense, sensing he recognized her. "It seems I've shown great disrespect to the Honorable Miss Shade." "My name is Baron Ralph Maximilian," he said, approaching her with a mocking bow and a sinister look. Now that he's introduced himself, he likely plans to kill Julie as well, Rita thought grimly. "So, you're Osland nobility too. What is the meaning of this recklessness? Untie us and release me immediately," Julie demanded, her voice trembling with fear. Ralph's response was swift, a hard slap that sent her to the ground trembling. "I can't stand noisy chatter. Girls, I swear," Ralph muttered harshly. Julie cowered, visibly shaking. "So, what brings you here, dear Miss Shade?" he asked calmly, looming over her. Before Julie could reveal that John had asked for her help, Rita knew she had to intervene. Better to be violated than violently murdered, she thought with dread. "Someone save us, please," Rita cried out, her voice desperate to distract him. Ralph Maximilian smirked. "First, shall we finish what we started earlier?" he said, his attention turning back to Rita. Julie screamed, but her voice was muffled as Ralph stuffed a cloth into her mouth. Please wait here, my lady, Ralph said mockingly, walking back to Rita. He resumed ripping her dress, exposing more of her underclothes, while Julie watched in horror, tears streaming down her face. Don't resent me, Ralph said, his eyes gleaming with sick desire. This is just compensation for all the losses you've caused me. Ralph Maximilian slid his hands along Rita's stockings, preparing to continue his vile plan. Miss Shade, I pray you watch carefully, he said with a twisted smile. This is the glorious moment when I will humbly sully Lady Verta's honor, he teased, pausing briefly. In that instant, Rita uncovered the hidden blade in her bracelet and plunged it deep into his neck. Seems it's impossible to pierce someone's neck in one blow with a woman's strength, she thought as Ralph clutched his neck, coughing up blood. Without hesitation, Rita kicked him hard, driving the blade deeper and ending his life. You talk too much, Baron Maximilian, she muttered with disgust. Did you hear that strange scream just now? One of the men outside asked. Wasn't that the boss having his fun? Another replied. I'll check the window. Another obstacle, Rita thought quickly. She climbed on top of Ralph's lifeless body, leaning forward as if nothing had happened. The man peeking through the window saw the scene and, satisfied, walked away. Rita wasted no time. She approached a candle, burning the ropes that bound her wrists. As the ropes fell, she noticed the painful scar left behind. The only person who can sully my honor is myself, she whispered coldly, her gaze shifting to Julie. She walked over to Julie, holding the candle. Stay quiet while I take care of the ropes, Rita said firmly. But if you're unlucky, you might be left with some burn marks. Is that all right? Julie nodded in fear, signaling with her eyes for Rita to remove the gag first. If it hurts, you might scream, and we'll both be caught. I'll take out the gag after I deal with the ropes, Rita told her. Julie flinched, trembling in pain as the heat from the candle scorched the ropes. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she remained silent, enduring the searing pain. As the ropes finally burned through, Julie was freed. Still trembling from the pain, she pulled off her gag. Not so bad then, Rita said, her expression cold. She grabbed Ralph's discarded shirt and put it on to cover herself. Now, how can we escape this place? She wondered, her mind racing. She noticed Julie struggling to lift a nearby bed. Julie? What are you doing? Rita asked, her voice sharp. I'm going to barricade the door. If we wait a little longer, soldiers from my estate will come to save us. When I was captured, I dragged my feet to leave a trail, Julie explained. Well. So you can be useful, Rita thought, impressed. I'll help you, she said, joining in. Together, they lifted the bed and jammed it against the door. From outside, the men heard the noise and rushed to the door, struggling to open it. What? Why won't it open? This is strange. Boss, please answer. One of them called out, pounding on the door. Another man ran to the window. He peered inside and froze at the sight of Ralph's lifeless body. Damn it, they took down the boss, he said, his voice tense. What? The other man exclaimed, kicking the door with all his strength. Damn it. It won't budge, he muttered, resuming his frantic attempts to break in. Inside, Rita and Julie leaned against the bed, bracing themselves. Just a little longer, Julie whispered, trying to reassure her friend. Suddenly, the door cracked under the pressure. Just wait till we get our hands on you. The men shouted, preparing for another blow. But before they could strike, a shout rang out. We're under attack. The men froze in place, startled. Soldiers have appeared. Someone shouted in panic, running toward the group. Julie, hearing the commotion, realized what was happening. They're here, They've come to save us. She cried, her voice filled with relief. She dashed to the window for a better look. It must be my brother and the soldiers. We're saved, she exclaimed joyfully. Rita sank to the floor in exhaustion and relief. Finally, she thought, her gaze shifting to the bracelet still lodged in Ralph Maximilian's neck. I suppose I won't be able to use that again. Her thoughts darkened. If I hadn't sent Heather into this plight in the first place, none of this would have happened. Others might call it retribution, but I have no regrets. In a world where only the strongest survive, the only law is kill or be killed. She clenched her wrist. Next time, I'll just have to be more careful of retaliation. Someone knocked on the door. Ver, are you in there? A voice called. Yes, I'm here, Rita replied, recognizing the person. It was Blaine. That's a relief. Could you open the door? Or is your appearance perhaps compromised? He asked, his tone calm but concerned. Indeed, I would describe it as such. Are you able to come in alone? She asked. Gladly, he responded. Julie quickly moved the bed away, unlocking the door. Blaine stepped inside, his face filled with worry. Without a word, he rushed to Rita and embraced her tightly. I'm so glad you're alive, he murmured, his voice full of emotion. Perhaps it's his familiar scent that puts me at ease, Rita thought, feeling a sense of calm wash over her in his presence. Blaine then pulled off his coat and gently draped it over her shoulders, covering her exposed skin. His eyes shifted to Ralph's lifeless body on the floor. Did that man do anything to you? He asked, his voice laced with quiet anger, a chill running down his spine. There are fools who blame the victims of crimes. But it seems you aren't one of them, Rita thought, her body relaxing. I'm fine. I took care of it before it got that far, she assured him. Blaine hugged her again, his touch softer this time. I have to ask you to save some for me next time, he whispered, holding her gently but protectively. They pulled away from the hug. See that over there? That was a gift I received just today, Rita said softly, glancing at her bracelet on Ralph's body. What a waste. I'll buy you 100 of the same one if you wish, Blaine said, taking her hand. His gaze fell on the bruises covering her wrist. From undoing the ropes. There were no knives around, unfortunately, she explained, retracting her hand. We'll call for the most skilled doctor in the kingdom. Not a single scar will remain, Blaine reassured her before planting a gentle kiss on her forehead. Julie, who had been watching in stunned silence, opened her mouth in disbelief. Wait. What are the two of you doing? She blurted out. But neither Blaine nor Rita paid her any mind as they embraced again, their connection palpable. Is Ver about to become my sister-in-law? Julie thought, panicking. Will I have to start using honorifics with her? She held her head in confusion. Just then, their father burst into the cabin, his face full of concern. Julie, my darling, are you all right? He asked, rushing to her. Father. I was so frightened, she cried, running into his arms. I'm sorry for coming so late, darling. Forgive me, he said, patting her back gently. His broad frame, still powerful despite his age, was a reminder of his time as the former commander of the Royal Guard. It's obvious where Blaine gets his good genes, Rita thought, quietly observing the man. Lord Shade's attention shifted to Blaine and Rita. Ignoring his son, his expression briefly tightened when his eyes landed on Rita, recalling how his daughter had once been sick from poison meant for her. But he quickly masked his reaction, turning back to Julie. Miss Verta, you've been through a terrible ordeal. Why don't you stay at our estate tonight? I'm sure Julie would feel safer with a friend nearby, and I'll send word to your parents so they don't worry, he offered while still comforting his daughter. Thank you, Rita said with a nod. Come to think of it, Verta's parents would have received word of my kidnapping by now, she thought, feeling a sudden weight of responsibility return. They left the cabin behind, making their way through the forest toward the Shade estate. Try not to look at the ground, Lord Shade said softly, glancing back at Rita. You too, Julie. They passed piles of bodies, carefully covered to spare them the sight of the carnage. The Duke is more considerate than I thought, Rita mused. Even in such a brutal situation, he took the time to shield us from the worst. Yet, as she scanned the soldiers surrounding them, she couldn't help but notice something odd. No soldiers from the Alberhart family. The absence felt pointed, an unsettling reminder of her own family's negligence. At the Shade estate, Rita was settled into a guest room. Though an emergency message must have been sent, no one from her family had come. No servants, no guards. They wanted me to die in those woods, she thought bitterly, anger bubbling beneath the surface. Exhausted, she eventually drifted into sleep, but peace did not come. In her dreams, Ralph Maximilian chased her. She ran desperately, only to trip and crash into the ground. As he reached for her, an evil smirk twisting his face, she screamed. She felt his hands tearing at her dress. Rita woke up startled, her heart racing, clenching her bedsheets. I feel awful. I'm not usually one to have nightmares like this. She looked around, disoriented, and noticed a teddy bear sitting beside her. Picking it up, she examined it closely, finding comfort in its simple presence. After dreaming about being chased, I feel thirsty, she thought, reaching for a nearby jug of water. Her hand slipped, startled by a sound, and the water spilled onto the floor. Rats, she muttered under her breath. Nothing feels right. Deciding she couldn't sleep, she got up, throwing on a light dress over her underdress. I'll go downstairs for some water, she thought, heading toward the door. As she opened it, she froze, surprised to see someone sitting on the floor just outside. Blaine, what are you doing here? She asked, her voice soft but curious. What is he doing here at the crack of dawn? Rita wondered, giving Blaine a curious stare. Ver, why are you awake? Blaine asked, his voice soft but filled with tension. Has he been here all night? She thought, noticing his calm demeanor. Is something wrong with the accommodations? Blaine asked, trying to stand up. No, I was just thirsty, so I thought I'd fetch some water, she replied. Oh dear, the maid must have forgotten. I'll have to give her a stern warning tomorrow, he said, his concern evident. I was the one who spilled the pitcher. Where can I go to find some water? She asked, keeping her voice steady. I'll go fetch some for you, Blaine said with a smile. It's cold out here in the corridor. Please wait inside. He glanced at her hands as she held them against her body for warmth. Rita nodded, watching him walk away. She stepped back into her room, closing the door behind her. In the room, she sat on the bed, she picked up the teddy bear. Perhaps it's the nightmare, but this doll feels ominous, she thought, glancing at the teddy bear. Just then, a sudden knock startled her, causing her to drop the bear onto the floor. Her heart raced as she remained frozen, almost startled by the timing. Ver, are you awake? Blaine called softly from outside. Rita stepped to the door and opened it suddenly, surprising him. There was no answer, so I thought you'd fallen asleep, he said, handing her a glass of water. Thank you, she replied, drinking it in one gulp. Blaine watched her, his face turning slightly red as he gulped hard. No, she's been through too much today, he thought, trying to push aside his feelings. Just what I needed, Rita exclaimed, feeling refreshed. I'll take my leave now. Rest well, Ver, Blaine said, reaching for the glass. Instead, Rita pulled the cup from him and set it on a nearby table. Ver, he called, his voice tense. She smirked and, without a word, grabbed his hand, pulling him inside the room and closing the door behind them. What are you doing? Blaine demanded, visibly unsettled. I want to sleep with you, she said plainly, stunning him. Are you opposed? She asked. Blaine was speechless, his mind racing. If this were any other day, I wouldn't hesitate. But after what she's been through. He felt tense, running a hand through his hair. His thoughts drifted back to the cabin, to her vulnerable state, and he clenched his fists. Verta is the light I've found. I can't lose her to some shallow desire. Blaine, I want you, Rita said again, her voice firm, her face flushed. Blaine's eyes widened in shock. She placed her hands on his chest, drawing him closer. They kissed, the tension melting into passion as soft moans escaped their lips. Rita gripped his shirt tightly, both of them lost in the moment. Blaine, breathless, gently lifted her onto the bed. Ver, from this point onwards, I won't be able to stop. Forgive me, he whispered, his face flushed, as they surrendered to the night together. The next morning, Rita noticed faint red marks on her body, remnants of last night's events. Yesterday, Duke Shade had been polite, withholding questions, but she knew today would be different. They would need her testimony to make sense of what happened. How should I approach this? She wondered, staring off in thought. Blaine stirred, wrapping his arms around her from behind. How are you feeling today? He asked softly, but Rita gently pushed him away. You should go back to your room now. I have a busy day ahead, she replied, her tone firm. Blaine chuckled, oh dear, are you sending me off after using me for my body? Oh, and before you leave, I'll need some contraceptives, she added, her voice matter-of-fact. You really are indeed heartless, he teased with a smile, kissing her back gently. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. In that case, Could you bring me another glass of water? I need to stay hydrated, she replied casually, already shifting her thoughts to the day ahead. Especially since I'll have to start crying those crocodile tears soon, she thought, her expression hardening. Meanwhile, Heather Maximilian sat trembling in her cell, her fingers clutching her dress in frustration. The royal guards had arrested her, and the absurdity of it all gnawed at her. I'm not a criminal, she muttered, pacing before running to the bars and shaking them in anger. I'm an official for the Kingdom of Osland, and I demand a fair trial. She shouted, her voice cracking as she sank to her knees. Verta Alberhart, why did she accuse me? Her mind raced with thoughts of revenge. Once I'm given a fair trial, I'll sue that little liar for libel. I'll prove my innocence, she resolved, her jaw clenched in fury. Outside the administrative building, a group of workers stood talking amongst themselves. Have you heard the rumor? One man asked. What rumor? Another responded, curious. You know Baron Ralph? The one who kidnapped Lady Verta? Word is the money he used to hire his thugs came from Heather. Well, she's always humiliated Lady Verta in front of the entire staff. It wouldn't surprise me, the second man said. Their conversation halted as they noticed Prince Van Brandt approaching. Your Honor, they greeted him with a bow. Good morning, Prince Brandt replied, moving past them. But as he walked away, their voices drifted back to him. Remember how awful Heather was to Lady Verta? I wouldn't have lasted a day in her shoes, one whispered, piquing his interest. A short time later, Prince Brandt was in the prison, seated with Rita. He observed her somber expression and bandaged hand. Lady Verta, he called, gaining her attention. Yes, Your Highness? Rita answered, her voice distant. If you feel overwhelmed or find giving your statement too difficult, just signal me, and we'll stop, he reassured her. Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness, she replied with a faint smile, her eyes heavy with unshed tears. Soon, Heather Maximilian was brought into the room in shackles. Rita watched her, noting how prison had taken its toll. Poor thing, she thought, her face betraying none of her inner satisfaction. Heather gasped upon seeing Rita. Verta Alberhart, she said angrily, her expression darkening with resentment. Prince Brandt noticed the sudden flash of hatred in Heather's eyes. This is why fools never win, Rita thought to herself. I shall now commence the interrogation. Lady Verta, your statement please, Prince Brandt said, after Heather was seated. While he was attempting to violate me, Baron Maximilian said his wife would have loved to see me in such a shameful state, Rita began, her voice trembling as she hugged herself, eyes filled with sorrow. Lies. Heather screamed, slamming her fists on the table. That's when I realized Officer Heather was his accomplice, Rita continued, tears streaming down her face. Your Highness, my husband and I had a fraudulent marriage. Besides, why would an officer of Osland like myself aid in such a vile act? This is a baseless accusation. Heather shouted, her voice shaking with anger. Why are you framing me? Rita gasped, putting a hand to her mouth. My God! How can you be so shameless? Even now, facing me, you show no remorse? Heather's fury peaked. You little wench! How dare you! She yelled before suddenly collapsing. A guard rushed to her side, helping her up as she lay unconscious. What a performance, Rita thought, her face neutral. Later, she walked through the administrative building with Prince Brandt. His silence was palpable. Is something on your mind, Your Highness? Rita asked, her voice gentle. Not at all. No need to concern yourself, Lady Verta, he replied, his tone reserved. It's me, isn't it? We barely made any progress today, Rita said quietly, pausing mid-step. Forgive me, she added, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Prince Brandt's expression tightened. He gently took her hand, carefully adjusting the bandage around her wrist. That's all right, I can do it, she protested softly. Allow me, he insisted, focusing on the task. Rita watched him in silence. After seeing Heather Maximilian's reaction, I fear this investigation will take longer than expected, he said, his voice low. Are you worried that continuing the interrogation will be too much for me? Rita asked, causing his face to flush slightly. Your Highness, she began, her voice soft and composed. May I make an unreasonable request? What sort of request? He asked, his brow furrowing. "I'd like to meet with Heather privately. It's too dangerous. She's already shown violent tendencies, and I can't risk her harming you," he replied, his concern evident. "I understand the risk, and truthfully, I'm afraid too. But I need to do everything I can to persuade her to confess. If I don't, I'll regret it," she explained, her tone earnest. "She is someone who has nothing left to lose," Prince Brant warned. "As long as we speak through the bars, I'll be safe." "Please, Van," she pleaded, holding his hand and gazing at him with imploring eyes. His cheeks reddened as he cleared his throat. "I'll give you 15 minutes. That's all the time I can allow." "Thank you so much, Your Highness," she said, her tone brightening as she held his hand a moment longer. "I just remembered an important matter I must attend to, so we'll part ways here." "Stay safe," he said, quickly withdrawing his hand and walking away, clearly flustered. Rita watched him go, a smirk playing on her lips. Toying with him is far too entertaining, she thought, her expression shifting to something colder as she turned. "Now, time to return home where the ones who wished me dead are. Let's see how those who crossed me fare." She walked away, her mind already plotting the next steps. Rita soon arrived at the Alberhart manor. "My darling, you're back," Lady Alberhart called excitedly as she descended the stairs to greet her. "It's so cold today. Go and draw a warm bath, then we'll have supper. Your favorite is on the menu tonight," she said, draping a scarf over Rita's shoulders. Rita watched her quietly, her expression unreadable. Does this woman truly love her daughter? She wondered. When Rita had returned from her kidnapping, Lady Alberhart had rushed to meet her as soon as she stepped out of the carriage, embracing her in tears. "Oh, my child. Thank goodness you're alive. You must have been so scared," she had cried, holding Rita tightly. All the crying and sobbing had seemed over the top. And yet, the Count had been nowhere in sight, just as he wasn't today. "Where is he?" she thought bitterly. "Go inside, dear. It's much too cold in the foyer," her mother urged. "Yes, mother," Rita replied, forcing a smile. "I can't trust her completely. For now, I'll just wait and see," she thought, her smile fading as she headed inside. A few days later, Rita stood with Prince Brant outside Heather Maximilian's prison cell. "I'll give you exactly 15 minutes. That's all the time you have," he told her. "It's not much time, but it's enough," Rita thought, smiling as she approached the cell, her footsteps echoing in the cold hallway. Inside, Heather was muttering to herself, unaware of Rita's presence. "It's not me. I'm being framed," she whispered, kneeling on the floor. She looked worse than the last time Rita had seen her. "Good," Rita thought, her smile growing colder. "Our debt-ridden account books will prove I was the head of the Maximilian household. Whatever evidence they think they have linking me to Ralph can't be solid," Heather muttered, gnawing at her nails in thought. Then, sensing someone near, she looked up and flinched. "If I spend one more day in this filthy cell, I'll lose my mind. I have to trick this girl into retracting her testimony. That's the only way out," Heather thought. "Once I'm back at my parents' estate, I'll take my revenge." "Miss Verta," Heather began, forcing a smile as she clutched the bars of her cell. "I had no idea my husband was capable of such horrors. It's true, I'm at fault for turning a blind eye and neglecting you. For that, I am sorry. So, this is her strategy? I thought she'd last longer," Rita mused, her expression serious. "But if she's willing to cooperate, that works in my favor." "Everything you said is true, Miss Verta. I did it. Just let me out of here," Heather pleaded desperately. Rita remained calm. "Please don't say things that aren't your crime, officer. I have a document in which the contents have been smudged." "You are the approving officer," she replied, pulling out a document and revealing it to Heather, whose face paled in shock. She's stunned. Of course, someone like me, who worked for the administration for only a short while, shouldn't have uncovered this, Rita thought. In reality, she had sought help from Blaine, who had come through, providing her with the incriminating evidence. "If it weren't for him, I never would have managed it," she reflected. "This form should never have been approved." "Why is your seal stamped on it, officer?" Rita asked, holding up the document for Heather to see clearly. "The applicant is Marquis Proud Carter, head of the administrative department." This application was submitted privately by the Marquis, correct? But when someone applies to establish a special laboratory, there's usually far more paperwork. Why is it missing? She pressed, watching beads of sweat form on Heather's brow. What is this girl implying now? Heather thought, her hands trembling. It seems you were too busy to properly review the documents, Rita continued. I intend to request a re-evaluation. Heather gasped. You've worked in the administration for mere months. How dare you question documents with my approval? Enough with these games. Retract your false testimony. Heather shouted, her voice rising in panic. Without warning, Rita stepped closer and grabbed Heather's hair, startling her. Wrong, Rita said coldly, her eyes darkening. Please don't tell anyone, Heather pleaded, her voice quivering. That's what you should be saying, Rita replied icily, still gripping her hair as Heather bowed, shaking with fear. Do you not understand the position you're in? Your fate is entirely in my hands, Rita added, yanking Heather's head up to meet her gaze. Why are you doing this to me? If it's because of how I treated you, I'll apologize. Please, Heather begged. Please, what? Rita cut her off, her tone unyielding. Heather's tears began to spill as she trembled. Please forgive me. I can't take another day in here. Please, let me out, Heather sobbed. Fine, but first, tell me what was originally written on this form, Rita said, releasing her grip with a cold smile. Later, Rita met with Prince Brant in his office, handing him the document. So, you believe Marquis Carter has been secretly manufacturing and distributing gunpowder from this laboratory? The prince asked, examining the certificate. Yes, Rita confirmed. But there's something I still don't understand. Why would he go to such lengths, threatening Heather and erasing the paperwork, just to obtain royal permission? That's because only laboratories with royal authorization can borrow and use special magical equipment, Prince Brant explained, exhaling slowly. Magical equipment? Rita repeated, looking puzzled. I'm afraid, it seems Carter may have discovered a way to use magic to produce his own gunpowder, the prince replied grimly. Impressive. Using equipment borrowed from the crown to manufacture illegal goods, Rita thought, contemplating Prince Brant's words. This is an evil and unforgivable crime, he said, clenching his trousers. Marquis Carter will be returning from abroad soon, correct? Rita inquired. He will return next week at the latest, Prince Brant confirmed. Then there isn't much time to investigate the laboratory. Someone will have to divert his attention elsewhere, she suggested. I believe I can manage that, Prince Brant replied, nodding slightly. Are you saying you'll get directly involved, Your Highness? Rita asked, surprised. I'm thinking of inviting an important guest from Richard, someone Marquis Carter has been concerned with for some time. If he arrives, the Marquis will be preoccupied with him, Brant explained, tapping the table thoughtfully. That night, Rita couldn't sleep, her mind racing over their conversation. Who could this figure be, the one Carter is so fixated on? She wondered. She slipped out of her room, wandering the hallways in silence when a faint sound caught her attention. What is that crying? She thought, following the noise to her parents' parlor. There, she found a maid cradling a crying infant. Just as I thought, a baby, Rita noted. The maid looked tense, struggling to soothe the child. Oh, Miss Verta. What brings you here in the middle of the night? The maid asked, her voice gentle but strained. The child's crying woke me, Rita replied. My apologies. Young Master Lucian has been particularly fussy at bedtime lately. I'll put him to sleep, miss. Please return to your chambers and rest, the maid said, trying to quiet the baby. I thought Lucian's nursery was on the upper floor, Rita mused. Why are you tending to him here instead of upstairs? She asked. But before the maid could answer, a sharp scream from Lady Alberhart echoed down the stairs, followed by the raised voice of Lord Alberhart. The sudden outburst made Rita flinch. Looking up at the ceiling, Rita remained calm while the child's cries echoed through the room. I see, she thought, her expression shifting slightly with worry. Oh dear. Poor thing, she said softly, touching the child's head before planting a gentle kiss on his forehead. The crying lessened as she comforted him. With fighting that loud, it's no wonder the child keeps waking. I'll spare you for now. There are more pressing matters to attend to, she thought, quietly hushing the baby. My parents seem a bit upset. How about soothing him in my chambers? Rita suggested to the maid. Yes, miss, the nanny replied, now more at ease as she stepped out of the room with the child. Rita locked the door behind them, slipping off her shoes and discarding them carelessly. She moved quietly, ascending the stairs as she tried to eavesdrop on her parents. This is all for Lucian's sake, her father said softly. Your son, your son, your son. I have heard enough, her mother yelled, catching Rita's attention. She silently approached their door, leaning in to listen more closely. We have no choice, Lord Alberhart continued. Think about what it took for us to conceive him. Do you even think of Ver as your child? Her mother asked, sobbing. Don't tell me you've never loved her. He watched her, his hand reaching out to stroke her gently. The reason I didn't send our own guards when Vera was kidnapped was because I trusted Duke Shade. I would never have left Verta to die, he said, but her anger flared. Stop lying. Then why did you hide the truth from me after you knew she'd been kidnapped? If you truly wanted to save her, there'd be no reason to keep it secret. She cried, tears streaming down her face. Dear. Lower your voice, I beg you. You'll wake the whole house, he pleaded, holding her shoulder gently. Sitting on the floor just outside, Rita's expression grew somber as she recalled her mother's tearful embrace the day she returned. So she had been genuine after all. The Count's wife truly loves Verta, she reflected, her emotions conflicted. I've heard all I need to hear, she decided, preparing to leave. Verta cannot spend the rest of her life alone. A man of that standard would make a decent suitor, her father said, startling Rita, who froze in place. An arranged marriage to get rid of me? She thought, her gaze darkening. Count Alberhart, it seems I'll have to get rid of you first.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible adventure. If you enjoyed what you watched, please consider liking, subscribing, and ringing that notification bell. Your comments mean the world to us and help us improve. The next episode promises even more excitement and unexpected twists, so stay tuned as we embark on this thrilling journey together. Keep the anticipation alive, and we'll catch you in the next episode.